The next woke disaster is upon us, and
the modern, identity politics.
That putting identity politics and woke messaging ahead of storytelling.
For the past few years, many of Hollywood's biggest franchises have all been infected with the brain rot that is identity politics.
Pronouns! Gender injecting woke political ideologies into video games with
the message. Instead of good storytelling, undid it in just a few short years.
And it's ruined everything.
They were the
I guess we all need therapy, don't we? Okay, there's been a lot of bad popular media lately, especially movies. There's still good stuff, of course, especially when you look outside the major studios, but in the last few years, there have been a ton of big releases that were just embarrassing, at a higher volume than usual, I think. As for why, that's a very complicated question. Some potential causes are overworking, studio complacency, emphasizing quantity over quality, consolidation, trends getting exhausted, and the effects of the pandemic, which you could argue started or escalated most of the things I just mentioned. It's most likely a combination of these. I can't call out the root cause with complete confidence, especially within the confines of a single video. But some people will confidently point towards wokeness, identity politics, virtue signaling, forced diversity, etc. as the primary problem, or at least a primary problem, with modern entertainment. In particular, you'll often see the claim that creatives are prioritizing the message over telling a good story. This take has existed for a long time, but I feel it's grown more prominent on YouTube in the last couple of years. The Critical Drinker might be the most influential film review channel right now, and if you look at any video on the broadly poor state of the movie, TV, or gaming industry, you don't have to scroll very far through the comment section before you find a string of people blaming progressive politics in some capacity. I've even found a handful of those comments in my videos. Clearly, there are a lot of people who hold this belief. And if you're one of those people, welcome, and thank you for making it this far. I'm glad you're willing to engage with opposing ideas. I recognize that our political beliefs are probably very different, but hopefully we can find at least something to agree on that you hadn't thought of before watching. Now, with that out of the way, let me explain how the idea that wokeness is killing pop culture is total nonsense, and every moment people spend complaining about it is, at best, a complete waste of time that distracts from the real issues at hand. I'm gonna focus on the claim that creators are prioritizing wokeness/diversity/political messaging over making good art. That's what most of these arguments seem to boil down to, at least as far as the art itself is concerned. With that in mind, let's look at what the supposed woke invasion actually amounts to. Again, limited to what's causing outrage in pop culture spaces. Let's see, we got an uptick in racial and gender diversity in blockbuster roles, including some race and gender changes in reboots, some trans-inclusive options for character creation in video games, a few brand Twitter accounts saying racism is bad, 2 immortal time travelers briefly suggesting they're bi, the occasional social justice-y quip, and maybe even some gay extras kissing in the background. There might be the occasional outlier, but those are the main things. You know what all of those have in common? They're all incredibly superficial details that can't possibly make or break the whole experience. In fact, they don't really affect the story at all. Look at Rings of Power. It has a diverse cast, and it had a mediocre first season. But think about it. If everyone in the show was white, what of importance would actually change? Literally nothing. It's a mid-show because it has a disconnected, tedious plot, a generic visual style, and a litany of cynical teases and fake deep dialogue, not because it has a black elf. Not to mention that making a commitment to colorblind casting has virtually no opportunity cost. Same goes for something like a pronoun toggle in character creation. Implementing that takes all of like 30 minutes. What are you possibly giving up by including it?
Oh, but these things are bad because the creatives are all diversity hires. They were brought on because of their gender or skin color instead of their talent.
No, they weren't. I obviously can't tell you the story behind everyone who worked on Rings of Power, but the showrunners were 2 white guys, and of the directors and screenwriters listed on Wikipedia, over half are male and all but 1 are white. They have extensive resumes, including shows like Doctor Who, The Sopranos, and Breaking Bad. I can't find any evidence that any of these people were brought on or define their creative identity based on their race, gender, or political beliefs, and it shows. The Rings of Power is an incredibly non-political series. The one time I do remember the show getting political, when the guy in Numenor yells about the elves taking their jobs, was dumb as hell, and it did take me out of the show. This was absolutely an example of lazy, forced politics, and a lot of people made fun of it.
Yeah, entertainment should be all about timeless escapism. Stop bringing modern-day politics into it.
First of all, this was one scene. It's maybe 0.5% of what didn't work about the show, and anyone who thinks politics should stay out of storytelling because of scenes like this is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, do you really think politically charged storytelling is a remotely new thing? So many artistic classics, including in the nerdy sci-fi/fantasy sphere, would be nothing without their political undertones. And I'm not even talking about their influence on the real world, I'm just talking about the stories themselves, how creators drew from causes they believed in to craft powerful narratives. Tolkien was a staunch conservationist, which inspired his imagery of Isengard's industrial hell and the uprising of the Ents. Superman was created by two Jewish Americans, and many of his comics parallel both the immigrant experience and the story of Moses. The X-Men are a pretty damn obvious metaphor for civil rights. This political streak has continued to inspire great stories into the current day. Look at how Andor portrays the dynamics of fascism, or how Barbie grapples with the complications faced by an icon of femininity.
But messaging and storytelling should come naturally. I don't want preachy modern-day politics forced down our throats.
Okay, on some level, I get this, at least in theory. When we sit down to watch a blockbuster movie or something, most of us are looking for escapism. Those classic examples I listed are fun pieces of entertainment with social subtext woven in, and the ability to do both simultaneously is what allows those messages to reach a wider audience. I can see why Barbie might have been too overt for some people who just wanted to go see a light comedy at the theater. Though still funny and self-aware, it is made of social commentary with hardly a metaphor to speak of. It's also true that political messaging can be done well, and it can be done poorly. Velma is another work whose social commentary does extend beyond brown main character, but its obnoxious attempts at satire mostly fail at being either funny or constructive. But Barbie and Velma are the exception, not the norm. If it was normal for movies and TV to be that provocative, Barbie wouldn't have made $1 billion and Velma would have gotten zero mainstream attention. When you look at the rest of these anti-woke punching bags, most of them are just formulaic blockbuster movies, shows, and games where the only thing quote-unquote political about them is that they have women and people of color as main characters, and might have a couple moments of clunky political dialogue like the taking our jobs thing. If those moments are forced down our throats, that's a speck of dust being forced down our throats. It's really not much to complain about.
But that means these companies don't actually care about the issues they claim to support.
If you're talking about, like, the higher-ups at Disney, I agree with you. It's bad to talk a big game about LGBT representation at some Comic-Con panel when the representation in your actual movies is just a 2-second kiss that gets cut out for China and Russia. Those execs only care about money, and they'll only pretend to care about social justice when they think it'll increase their profits. But if this is the case, claiming that modern Disney products suck because they're too obsessed with sending the message is a laughable contradiction. And the fact that hypocritical corporate virtue signaling exists doesn't mean there are no creatives working on those projects who genuinely do believe in those messages, nor does it mean we should treat simple representation like it's not a good thing. In some cases, it's only skin deep, but including characters of different races, genders, body types, and the like can open up new possibilities for storytelling. You can have a more colorful cast of characters if you're allowed to break stereotypes. Including same-sex relationships literally doubles your opportunity for romantic storylines. Stories with diverse characters don't have to be about those identities, and most of these modern cases aren't at all. The Ahsoka series has 2 women of color as its leads, but it's not remotely about the POC female experience. It's a generic Star Wars show that just happens to star 2 generic protagonists who are not white guys. If that's ruining the show with politics, that's really a you problem.
But like, wokeness has to be self-evidently bad. All the woke stuff is crap, and all the crap stuff is woke.
If you think this, I really want to see what cherry tree you're picking from. I mean, there's still plenty of bad stuff starring straight white guys. Morbius, Ant-Man 3, Thor 4, Shazam 2, and that's just looking at the big superhero movies. And on the other hand, many of the most universally beloved hits of the past few years have plenty of elements that should be labeled as woke, both in the outrage/clickbait sense and the genuine social commentary sense. The Batman has a race-swapped Catwoman. Baldur's Gate 3 has an all-bisexual main cast. Spider-Verse and Scott Pilgrim Takes Off both use a white male legacy hero as a supporting character for a black and female lead, respectively. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 speaks out against eugenics and animal abuse. Andor is a detailed portrait of a fascist state. There's just no real correlation between wokeness and poor quality, and how could there be? If you actually take a look at what kind of political themes there are in popular media today, and what kind of pieces of media are decried for being woke trash, their actual problems have almost nothing to do with the presence of social messaging. There's a fair bit of purely performative representation out there, but it's shallow by definition. Even if it was bad, it just wouldn't have the power to ruin anything to the core. The only way you might think that is if there was a huge social media ecosystem talking ad nauseum about how entertainment is dead and it's woke's fault, ignoring the actual causes and embellishing things like race and gender swap to the point where they might convince some inattentive audiences that those things actually matter. Glad that doesn't exist, right? Part 2 of this video coming soon. Hope you're enjoying, because this is costing my sanity. Bye!